Well, Risk Profile, I'm really excited to bring Ashley Dewalt on the podcast today. Ashley Dewalt is the new managing director of a startup called Divinc from Austin, founded by Dell alumni, to bring knowledge and education and funding to underrepresented founders, specifically in Ashley's case here in the Houston area. And his background is a wild ride, starting from college. And I can't wait for him to share a story. Ashley, thanks for joining us.
Hey, it's a pleasure. I'm looking forward to diving into the story. It's definitely an honor being here, and I'm ready. I'm excited. I'm ready to go.
Awesome. Well, I think just based on your background and the fact that you are launching an accelerator, we both have a passion for early stage startups, and I think in both of our cases, we also bootstrapped our first venture.
Yes.
What did it take to get your business started?
Yeah. So, man, great question. So just, this is, first of all, today is really special. I turned 40 today.
Oh, happy birthday.
Yeah, the big 4-0. So trust me, I feel every bit of it physically now.
Yeah.
And so, I'm excited about doing this podcast with you today, man. So again, thank you. But to answer your question, I think that, there's from a earlier, when I started as a young entrepreneur, there were things that I personally, I didn't have a family of people around me that were entrepreneurs. I kind of had to learn from a school of hard knocks. At that time, since I've already let the cat out of the bag as far as my age, but at that time when I was, in my early 20s, there was no type of, like a center for entrepreneurship, like how we have those things these days. Mm-hmm. We didn't have that 15 years ago, right? I think, when you talked about entrepreneurship at that time, people thought you just sat around all day and ate, bonbons, and so they didn't realize how much work it was to be an entrepreneur and how it's a constant roller coaster, right? And so I think at that age, when I was young, I learned School of Hard Knocks. I learned a lot through AOL. At the time, they sent those AOL discs, and mm-hmm. I was on dial-up. We had AOL and Netscape, and I remember Google was when it was just coming around, but it was that long ago. And because I didn't go to, there was no type of formal education around it to talk about entrepreneurship. I learned everything online. I learned how to write a business plan online. I learned how to write a press release online. All of these different things as far as aspects of business, I learned everything online, just through Google. And so, for me, my background was in finance. Mm-hmm. So I went to undergrad in finance, got my undergraduate degree in finance, my graduate degree in sport management. But, at the time when I was in school, I was actually going to school to be an investment banker.
Yeah.
I had this dream of literally, moving to New York, working on Wall Street,
right.
And just working at Goldman or, Merrill Lynch and just living the life. Right. And, but, things, I guess God had a different plan for me. And, I always had a passion for sports, always had a passion for technology, mm-hmm. always had a passion for entrepreneurship. And so at that time, I was like, man, all three things have kind of converged, and I love what I do.
Yeah.
And so, I think that, at that time, and it was really just being a young entrepreneur, really wet behind the ears. There was a lot of ups and downs. And I know we can dive into that a little bit later, but for me, I just a journey from that point to now. And when I just kind of reflect on it now that we're having a conversation, man, it's been an amazing ride.
So how'd you get started? You did your homework. You saw a business opportunity at the age of 21.
Yeah.
What was the next step?
Yeah. So this was funny. I was actually leaving. It was Nordstrom and Neiman Marcus, the Galleria. And that's when the idea popped in my head, because the idea was to basically, at that time, create official websites for professional athletes. And again, I'm going to date myself here, but I grew up around like the old school Reggie Miller, Larry Bird, Magic Johnson, Michael Jordan.
When basketball was great.
Yes, exactly. When that was like the golden era of basketball.
Absolutely.
And so when the Dream Team was around, the 92 Dream Team and all these other Dream Teams, I was like, man, these guys, how do they connect with their fans on a global perspective, right? And so for me, that was like the aha moment where I was like, okay, guys like Karl Malone or John Stockton or all these different athletes, let me start seeing if they have official websites.
Right.
And so as I started to kind of do my research, I found out a lot of them didn't. Not even Mike, not even MJ. Wow. Which at that time was crazy, because you think about guys now, whether it's Kevin Durant, Steph Curry, LeBron, they have websites, out of the gate. Yeah. And so, at that time, like I said, that was for me the aha moment. But the problem was I wasn't a web designer. Mm-hmm. I wasn't a web developer, So what I had to really do is, and again, I think this is something that entrepreneurs should always focus on, is doing your homework, doing your research. Yeah. And so I did a lot of research, and I scoured the globe for talent to design websites for me. And so that was really the birth of my company. And it was one of those things to where I said, okay, well, let me start building these official websites. And so that was in my earlier years. And so, had the pleasure of building these official websites. And then when social media came around 2006, like MySpace, Facebook, then my company started to evolve along with the times. And so eventually went from, creating these official websites to, building out, Hines Ward, a MySpace page, Ray Lewis's Facebook page, and so it was really fun, even Twitter. I remember when those platforms were coming around and I would talk to my clients, there were all these different pro athletes, and they're like, man, why do I want to post where I'm at all the time? I don't want people to know that I'm at this restaurant. I'm like, Ray, just do it. Just trust me. This thing is going to be huge. And Shaq, if you think about it, Shaq was one of the early adopters of Twitter. Yeah. Guys like Shaq, they were really early adopters. And so I think that helped more athletes start to kind of grasp this new kind of frontier with social media. So again, that's when my company started to evolve. But I started off broke college student. Real quick story. I was at U of H taking a marketing course at Bauer, and did not know that the guy that was in my class, his name was Stanford Routt. Yeah. So now he's an analyst on NFL Network and stuff like that. But at the time, he and I were classmates. And I was going to go meet with his agent here in Houston, agency by the name of Select Sports Group. Yep. And had no idea that this guy, I went to go meet with them, and they were like, the guy we're going to be representing, he goes to U of H, his name is Stanford Routt. And I'm like, Stanford? I said, hold on, this guy's in my marketing class. So, it's just crazy, man, just wild stories like that. But like I said, for me, I didn't know how, I didn't have certain skills. Sure. But what I did was I actually went out there and I used, at the time, Behance was one, Dribble. I used Dribble, Behance. I would communicate with them on Skype when Skype was, launching. So, I would use those different tools to really expand my reach as far as communication with some of the best talent in the world. And so I had the pleasure of, bringing on some of these talented designers in Brazil, Germany, Taiwan. And so really I had a remote agency consultancy really before, like, people talk about remote now. Yeah. Where I had the remote piece 15 years ago. Yeah. I never knew any of these. I never physically met these folks. It was all just through IMs, so it was crazy. Yeah.
So you bootstrapped not only your knowledge and your education, but also your company based on seeing a need and having a little bit of luck and opportunity to get things going. As you're going, technology is changing. You're constantly adopting it with the flow and changing the mindset. And you've been doing that from Houston. I would think that most people that do what you do or did would have done that from places like LA or New York. Why Houston?
Yeah, you know what? To be honest, man, there's so much talent in Houston now. At the time, this was like 15 years ago. Like a lot of the talent was in New York, LA, overseas. And then for me as a business person, I was always looking at the bottom line, right? So I'm like, okay, I can go and hire this person in Cologne, Germany, or over in Taiwan or, Manila, and I can have a better bottom line, basically. Sure. And so for me, that was one of the driving factors, motivators for me to outsource that specific talent.
Sure.
But without sacrificing the quality, right? Yeah. And so, I just think that now Houston is in a really great spot as far as talent. Yeah. I can't remember the report that I saw. I think it was Greater Houston Partnership or Houston Exponential recently had a report about our ecosystem and how we're actually we're one of the leaders as far as talent.
Sure.
And so, it's crazy to see that shift over this, 10, 15, year window, which is awesome, because now it allows for entrepreneurs that are, founders here in Houston now, they don't have to really outsource a lot of stuff anymore overseas. Yeah. Whereas that's what I had to do at the time. So I'm excited about just this whole ecosystem and how it's continuously, thriving. Mm-hmm. And I think it's just more, people, you have people now coming in from San Francisco, from New York now that are moving to Houston. And so I think it's only going to get better, to be honest. And so, I'm excited about that.
So, have you made a full pivot out of traditional kind of sports marketing? And I know you spent some time with the Houston Outlaws, an esports organization, and you're obviously very bullish on Houston's future in terms of a tech-based economy.
Yes.
What do you think is so exciting both now and in the future in terms of marketing?
Yeah, I think, from a marketing perspective, just because that's really been my background for the last 15 years, marketing, branding, strategy. I've been fortunate to be able to be in a room with the marketing teams for Under Armour or Nike, or, I've been able to be fortunate to be able to, work with these folks and from a, consultant standpoint and be able to, throw ideas around and, work together on marketing campaigns for, college properties and stuff like that. But, saying it to say, the experiences that I've had there, also with my experiences with Scoreboard Ventures, sure, which is one of the leading sports tech VCs and accelerators in the country, just being able to be in a room with a Mike Chafin, who's a business partner of Mark Cuban, and listening to the future of sports and esports and things like that, I believe that Houston, we have an untapped potential when it comes to sports tech. Yeah. Because, like I said, for the last 4 years, I was driving back and forth, flying back and forth, driving back and forth to Frisco. In Frisco, and I was looking at and observing what Frisco was doing in terms of what they were building from an esports perspective. They have the Esports Arlington Stadium. Yeah. They have Complexity there. That's located at the Star. They have GameStop Performance Center. They have, the Dallas Fuel, Optic Gaming, over the last 4 years, I was witnessing all of this stuff kind of going on. And I would go to, there's a place called Scoreboard Ventures. Okay. So it's a VC that is in Frisco where a lot of those organizations were housed. And so we would have our mentor meetups at Stadia at Scoreboard. And so I'm seeing all this stuff happening and I'm like, man, why can't we do this in Houston? Yeah. And so I think that now is that time. I really believe, there's leaders in the sports space in Houston across the teams, all the different professional sports teams, but also at the collegiate level as well too, that understand how tech can really improve the fan experience, venue experience, all of these different type of experiences that you want. That you want folks to be a part of. Yeah. And so I think that now is that time. The Houston Outlaws are now down here. So I had the pleasure of, working with Lori Burgess, who was the CEO of the Outlaws. And that last year, that was a blast. And so just being able to lift the hood from, underneath and actually see all the different aspects of the Outlaws from a team perspective. And like I said, just really being able to see those opportunities that exist in esports and sports from a business perspective.
Right.
I think the time is now for Houston to really be able to capitalize on that.
Yeah. So now let's kind of wrap that into maybe what you're doing with Divinc. As you're working with the underrepresented founders, I know you've just recently signed a partnership with Verizon for your new cohort starting next month.
Yep.
So what does that look like? What are you looking for in those founders? Is it simply for them to believe in themselves and align that with their understanding, or is it really to empower them with knowledge that you feel like anybody can execute on, given enough gumption?
Yeah, I mean, to be honest, it's both. It's both. And Verizon. So just kind of give you guys some context. Like, Verizon came on board as a partner. JP Morgan came on board. Right now we're going to be doing the accelerator virtually. Just until things kind of settle down with COVID, with the pandemic, et cetera. But, with Verizon, the startups, one of their criteria was the fact that they needed to be able to just leverage the 5G technology.
Sure.
And it was industry agnostic. And so we have some really amazing startups that I believe we're going to be making an announcement next week. And so I'm really excited about that because, it's some really solid, talented founders that I think that once they come through our accelerator program, we build them up and then we can launch them off to like a Techstars, a Mass Challenge.
Yeah.
I think that I'm just really excited about the talent level, compared to, 10 years ago, and I think, going back to your point as far as being able to empower them, at Divinc, we want to be able to give them like those resources.
Right.
So like some of the barriers that these underrepresented founders face is like lack of education.
Yeah.
And it really resonates with me because I was in those shoes, in my earlier days. And so it's a lack of education, the lack of know-how. And so what we've done through Divinc is provide types of, workshops, programming to really meet them at whatever stage they're at in their entrepreneurial journey. And so, that's one barrier that we address with workshops and programming. And then another one is the lack of opportunity.
Right.
And so we provide them with, different type of resources such as subject matter experts. We open up our pretty much our network of, VCs, angels, to be able to engage those founders. Sure. Because at the end of the day, it's a lot of times it's about relationships. And I think that just me coming from that sports and entertainment industry, for me, all of the clients that I've ever worked with for my entire 15-year career was all based on word of mouth.
Yeah.
All relationships, whether it was agents, whether it was pro athletes, whether it was, athletic directors, head coaches, all based on relationships. And so I'm very big on relationships and building meaningful, sustainable relationships. And so, we provide that network for those, for those founders. And then the third barrier is lack of funding.
Yeah.
And so how we address that is, we have our demo days, we have our, our investor dinners. And we put those founders, when the time is right, in front of those VCs, in front of those angel investors. So then that way they can potentially have the opportunity for funding. And so, for us, those are like the three barriers that we really try to address when they come in through Divinc.
Yeah.
And then once they're finished with our 12-week accelerator, then we have an alumni program. And so that alumni program is pretty much like an 18-month program. Mm-hmm. And so when they come through, we make sure that we continue to give them that support.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So it's so tangible to me, seeing your background and then taking that background in your success and going to the next generation saying, hey, look, here's what I did. Yeah. I've learned a few things along the way, by the way, but here's what I did. You can do it too. The key skill in entrepreneurship is really the ability to build and maintain relationships and probably to do your homework. Yes. So Houston is a city that has a lot of people, diversity obviously being a huge strong suit for the city, more kind of globally.
Right.
And we're a city of businesses as well. So I can't, I get really excited as a founder from Houston, working with startups here in Houston as well. Ashley, is there something that maybe somebody listening to this podcast, they've been kicking this idea around in their head, and not sure if they're qualified for it, or not sure if they can really pull it off? What do they do? What would you say to them?
You know what I would say? To believe in you, to bet on yourself, because when you bet on yourself, you're gonna win every time. I know I bet on myself throughout my journey.
Yeah.
When people said that I couldn't do it, people said, "Man, why do you want to do this? How are you gonna meet these guys? I've always bet on myself. And I would say that's the one thing as a founder, you bet on yourself, you'll never lose.
Yeah.
But then you also have to be coachable.
Yeah.
And so a lot of times, for me, I've learned to be a perpetual learner. Mm-hmm. And I think that is something that as a founder, you have to have that type of mindset. You have to have, when we talk about this entrepreneurial mindset, you have to be a perpetual learner, and you have to be coachable. To me, and this is just from me, being a former athlete, playing basketball. I was always a coachable athlete.
Right.
I can take constructive criticism. And I would say to that founder that's listening to this podcast is, look, don't just, do your research. Yes. But with that research, understand in the journey that you can have this great idea for this product. But again, throughout that journey, you might have to pivot. And a lot of founders...
You probably will pivot.
Yes. A lot of founders, early stage founders, they struggle with the pivot.
Yeah.
I pivoted in my career 3 times.
Right.
And you have to understand and be a master at the art of the pivot.
Yeah.
That is a one thing, that I would say for a founder, you really need to be able to understand when it's time to pivot, because you can think that your product is the best thing on earth.
Yeah.
But, if you're getting feedback and you're getting, and it's, you might have to pivot and do something different.
So that's kind of a blessing and a curse, because knowing that you're going to have to change it down the road more than likely,
yes,
that kind of removes almost a barrier to getting going to begin with, because it doesn't have to be perfect.
No.
And I think there's a lot of wisdom in not letting the perfect be the enemy of the good.
Yes. Yeah. You need to just start it. Just do it. Just do it. Don't worry about trying to make it perfect. Just start building it.
Yeah.
Build it. Do your research. And to me, you can't get caught up in the, trying to just make it perfect. Like you can't, you'll be trying to build a product forever. And the one thing I can also add to it is, for a founder, you really have to have self-awareness of your strength and weaknesses. And I think that throughout my journey as an entrepreneur, I've been able, and again, this draws just from my experiences being a basketball player. I knew there were certain weaknesses in my game, and I worked on that, and I turned those into strength. And I think the same applies to any founder. But it starts with being self-aware, and understanding what are those things that you really need to turn into a strength that are those weaknesses.
Awesome. Well, Ashley, how do our viewers reach out to you?
So they can reach out to me. I'm always on LinkedIn, so they can reach out to me. Shoot me a message on LinkedIn, Ashley Dewalt. They can reach out to me on email, ashley@divinc.org, so divinc.org, and just drop me a message. And I'm here for the community. I'm here for our founders in the city. For me, when I took on this role as the MD, the managing director for Divinc, my purpose was to serve the community, to serve these founders, because I've been in those shoes for the last 15 years. And being a founder is lonely sometimes. Yeah. It's very lonely. And I've
especially at the beginning. Yeah.
Yes. And I want to be here for those founders to be able to, pick them up, dust them off. Let's go. Let's get to work. Let's get to work. Your story's not over. Let's get to work, because I was blessed to have that later on. But in my earlier years, I didn't have that. Yeah. And so I went through a lot of sometimes bouts of depression because I felt by myself. I felt like I had no one to talk to.
Yeah.
And so I want to be there for these founders and be able to be that, almost like a coach.
Yeah.
I almost consider myself like a coach, now. And being able to give that support, mentorship, guidance, so that way they can avoid some of those barriers or obstacles that I, encountered throughout my journey.
Yeah, totally makes sense. Well, Ashley, I'm very thankful that you were able to come on the show today, and appreciate your wisdom for the city of Houston. Absolutely. And basically, credentials don't matter. Get out there and hustle. You're going to have to pivot anyway. Just get going. Yes. And then while you're there, find somebody around you to dust you off when you hit a brick wall and keep on going. Yes. Well, guys, this has been Risk Profile. Please like our podcast. Please subscribe to it. It helps us keep things moving. And if you want to give some comments or share a lead with us as far as somebody that should be on the podcast to tell their story, we'd love to hear it. You can always reach out to me at mark@riskprofile.us. And we're looking forward to one day telling your story. Go be someone.